I live with someone I don't love anymore. I don't mean the way people say it in anger or during an argument or as a threat they don't plan to follow through on. I mean it in the quiet, literal way you say something to yourself when it's already been true for years. I wake up beside her, I make coffee, I ask how she slept, and there's nothing inside me that moves. Not dislike, not resentment, just a kind of stillness, like the part of me that used to reach for her has been packed away in a box I never open. I don't think she notices, or maybe she does, and she's learned to live around it. We've both gotten good at that, circling each other like people who know the room by heart and don't need to turn the lights on anymore. I used to tell myself it was a phase, stress, routine, age, all the usual excuses people use when they don't want to admit something irreversible. But the truth is simpler. Somewhere along the way, whatever I felt just stopped, not suddenly. Not with a fight or betrayal or some cinematic breaking point. It was quieter than that. It happened the way dust gathers, slowly, invisibly, until one day you notice the layer and realize you haven't touched that surface in a long time. I don't say this proudly. I don't even say it with regret. I'm too far past the point where regret fixes anything. I say it because I'm tired of hearing my own silence echo in every room of this house. I'm tired of pretending that going through the motions still means something. I think the hardest part was accepting that nothing extraordinary caused it. No tragedy, no cruelty, no unforgivable moment. Just time, and the quiet shrinking of something I always assumed would replenish itself. It didn't, and instead of fighting for it, I let it fade. I watched myself become a man who kisses a cheek without feeling the warmth, who listens without hearing, who lies beside someone out of habit, not desire or tenderness. I know what this sounds like. I know how it lands, but I'm not looking for sympathy or judgment or understanding. I've lived too long with this truth to expect anything from it now. I just need to finally say it out loud, even if no one ever answers back. I used to think there had to be some hidden reason for it, something broken deep in my past that would make the whole thing make sense. But the truth is disappointingly ordinary. My life has been normal in every recognizable way. I grew up in a house that wasn't perfect but wasn't cruel. My parents argued sometimes, but they stayed together, paid their bills, cooked dinner, asked about homework. I went to school, made a few friends, lost a few, nothing tragic. I worked regular jobs, the kind where you show up, do what you're supposed to, and go home feeling tired in a way that makes you think you earned the rest. I met her in my 20s, not in some storybook moment, just a mutual friends gathering where everyone was half bored and half hopeful. She laughed easily. I liked that about her. We dated in the usual way, dinners, movies, small gifts that felt bigger than they were. When we moved in together, it wasn't a grand decision. It just felt like the next step. Everything about us looked right from the outside. We made grocery lists together, argued about the thermostat, celebrated birthdays with the same predictable rituals every year. Our families liked each other. Our friends said we were solid, stable, good for each other, and maybe we were, in that mechanical way people call compatibility when nothing is actively falling apart. There were no dramatic fights, no slammed doors, no nights where one of us slept somewhere else. That's the part I keep circling back to, the absence of anything obviously wrong. I think that's what makes the whole thing harder to explain, even to myself. Because if there had been chaos or cruelty, then losing the feeling would have made sense. But everything was fine, comfortable, predictable, and maybe that was the problem. Comfort is quiet, and in that quiet, I started drifting without realizing I was moving at all. I'd come home from work, kiss her on the forehead, ask about her day, eat dinner, wash dishes, sit beside her on the couch, all the things you're supposed to do. And somewhere in that routine, the feeling that used to pull me toward her softened into something lighter, thinner, easier to ignore. It didn't hurt, it didn't scare me, it just thinned out until it wasn't really there. And because nothing was wrong, I didn't question it. I told myself I was tired, distracted, stressed, aging. I told myself love changes shape, becomes steadier, less urgent. Maybe that's true for some people. But what I felt wasn't a change of shape. It was the disappearing of one. And instead of stopping to look at it, I got better at pretending I didn't notice. Life went on. Work, holidays, weekends that blurred together. She'd touch my arm in the kitchen and I'd react a beat too late. She'd tell a story and I'd nod in all the right places without remembering the details later. But none of it looked alarming from the outside. We weren't miserable. We weren't distant enough to worry our friends. We were just fine. And fine can cover a lot of emptiness if you let it. That's what scares me now when I think back. Not the emptiness itself, but how easily it hid inside a normal life. How long it went unnoticed because the surface looked clean and functioning. I used to think love leaves with a bang. Turns out it can slip out the back door so quietly you don't even hear the latch click. I think what kept me anchored for so long was the role itself, not the feeling behind it. Being a partner is a script most people learn without realizing. You show up, you remember anniversaries, you sit through the same conversations about work and errands and small frustrations. I played that role well. I was dependable, steady, the kind of person you could leave in a room full of quiet and trust that nothing chaotic would happen. I fixed things around the house before she asked. I drove her to appointments. I held her hand in waiting rooms. On paper, I did everything a loving partner is supposed to do, and for a long time, that was enough to convince me the feeling was still there, just quieter, just buried under the weight of adulthood. But there were small moments that didn't fit the script, moments I kept brushing aside, like the way I'd pull back half a second too soon when she hugged me in the hallway, or the way I'd hesitate before kissing her goodnight, not out of conflict, but out of habit. Like I had to remember the step before performing it. There were nights when she'd sit beside me on the couch, her knees touching mine, and I'd feel nothing but the shape of the contact, no warmth behind it, not discomfort. That would have at least been something, just neutrality, a polite closeness. I noticed myself listening to her with the same kind of focus I used at work when a colleague talked about something I wasn't invested in, attentive enough to follow, distant enough to forget. She'd tell me about a friend's drama or a dream she had, and I'd nod, ask a question, respond at the right moments. Then an hour later, the whole thing would be gone from my mind, like I'd never been part of the conversation. I think the saddest part is how ordinary all of it looked. If you filmed us, you'd see two people functioning well, eating dinner, folding laundry, paying bills, laughing at something mildly funny on the TV. You'd think that's a stable couple, and maybe we were. Stability can hide a dead heart better than chaos ever could. I kept telling myself that acting the part was a kind of love in its own way, that showing up, being reliable, being gentle even when tired was proof enough. But deep down, even then, I knew I was offering her the surface of me, not the center. I remember one night in particular, her birthday. We were at a restaurant she loved, the kind with soft lighting and appetizers you pretend to understand the names of. She leaned across the table, smiling in that familiar way, the one I used to feel in my chest, and I smiled back, perfectly, convincingly. But inside there was nothing, just a quiet awareness of how I must look from her side of the table, how practiced I'd become at mirroring emotions I no longer felt. She reached for my hand, and I let her take it, and we stayed like that for a while. Anyone watching would have thought they were seeing affection. What they were seeing was muscle memory, a gesture preserved long after the feeling that once shaped it was gone. I didn't pull away. I didn't freeze. I just sat there, letting the moment pass through me like air through an open window. And the worst part is that she seemed happy. She squeezed my hand gently, as if she felt connected to me. I remember thinking how strange it was that someone could be holding your hand and not realize they're holding on to someone who isn't really there anymore. That mismatch, her warmth, my absence, became the quiet pattern of our life. Not a rupture, not a betrayal, just two people walking side by side, one of them still living the relationship, the other performing it. and nobody noticing the difference, not even me, not fully, not until much later. It didn't break in some dramatic way. I think that's why it took me so long to recognize it. There was no affair, no confession, no slammed door at midnight, just a morning, an ordinary, nothing special morning, where something inside me finally stopped pretending. I remember waking up before her, the room still dim, the air cool in that way it gets when the heat hasn't kicked in yet. I lay there for a few minutes, listening to her breathe beside me, the steady rhythm that used to make me feel grounded. I watched the rise and fall of her shoulder under the blanket, and for the first time, I didn't feel comfort. I didn't feel annoyance either, or resentment. I just felt this sharp, quiet awareness that she was a stranger who knew every detail of my life, a familiarity without closeness, a history without presence. I got out of bed slowly, careful not to wake her, and went to the kitchen. The house was so still it almost felt like it was listening. I made coffee, same beans, same mug, same routine I'd repeated thousands of times, but the motions felt foreign, like I was following someone else's script. I sat at the table and stared at the steam rising, and something in me tightened in a way I couldn't ignore anymore. It wasn't sadness, it wasn't guilt, it was recognition, a kind of internal clicking into place, like the truth had been waiting for the right angle of light to finally show itself clearly. I think the moment that did, it wasn't even about her, it was about me. I looked at her slippers by the door, the ones she always forgets to put away, the ones I move aside every morning, and instead of the usual mild irritation or affection or whatever I'd pretended to feel, there was just this hollow space where an emotion should have been. Empty, but not peaceful. More like a room that had been lived in once and then abandoned without warning. I walked back to the bedroom doorway and just stood there, watching her sleep. The curtains were shifting a little from the draft, and the early light hit her face in a soft, uneven way. She looked older than I'd let myself notice, tired in places I'd never really seen. I realized I hadn't looked at her, truly looked, in years, not at who she'd become, not at how time had settled on her. I'd been seeing the idea of her, not the person, and standing there, it became painfully clear that I wasn't part of her world anymore, not in the way that mattered, not in the way that makes a shared life feel alive. I think she would have been shocked to hear that. From her side, we were fine, maybe even good. She would tell people we were steady, safe, that we understood each other. She'd talk about us as if it was still something shared. I don't blame her for that. I played my part well. I kept the routine intact. I kept the peace. I followed the script so convincingly that even I forgot it wasn't real. But that morning, standing in the doorway, something broke open. Not loudly, just a soft internal fracture that changed the shape of everything. I saw the years behind us and the years ahead, and they both felt the same, quiet, polite, hollow. A life built on the momentum of choices I stopped feeling connected to decades ago. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I didn't feel the urge to run or confess or fix anything. I just felt this cold understanding settling in my chest. I had already left the relationship years before my body would ever dare to. And the worst part was knowing that she had no idea. She loved someone who wasn't standing in that doorway anymore. She shared a home with someone who was already gone in every way that counts, and I realized, with a kind of tired clarity, that nothing dramatic had stolen the love. I had simply let it fade so quietly that even I didn't hear the last of it slipping away. By the time I noticed, there was nothing left to hold, nothing left to return to, and no way to say any of it without breaking the only version of us she still believed in. All I could do was stand there in that dim morning light, carrying a truth that arrived too late to change anything. I didn't say anything that morning. I didn't shake her awake or sit her down or start a conversation we both knew would have no place to go. I just walked back into the kitchen and let the day unfold the way it always did, step by step, gesture by gesture, as if nothing inside me had shifted. And maybe that's the part that feels the heaviest now, how easily life kept moving even after I finally admitted to myself that I wasn't really part of it anymore. Days blurred the way they always have. We cooked dinner. We watched shows she liked. She told me about her coworkers and her sister's new problems. I nodded, I answered, I laughed at the right moments. I wasn't lying, not exactly. I was just filling the space with the version of me she still recognized, the version she needed, the version I had practiced for so long it no longer took effort. I think that's why leaving wasn't an option. Not because of fear or loyalty or some noble sense of responsibility, but because there was nowhere for the truth to go. She deserved someone who felt the things I pretended to feel, and I deserved, I don't know, maybe nothing. Maybe just the honesty I was finally willing to look at. But honesty doesn't fix a shared life. It just sits there like a cold stone in your pocket, reminding you of what can't be undone. So I stayed, not out of love, not out of hope, just out of the quiet understanding that the damage was already done, and revealing it wouldn't unbreak anything. It would only scatter the pieces into sharper shapes. I've spent years now moving through this house like a man tending to a memory of himself. I mow the lawn, I take out the trash, I lock up at night. Sometimes she leans her head on my shoulder when we watch TV, and I feel nothing but the faint awareness of weight and warmth. She'll smile at me in that familiar, trusting way, and I'll smile back because it's what my face has learned to do. I don't think she knows, or maybe she senses the distance but has her own ways of naming it. Stress, aging, routine. People don't look too closely at the cracks that don't threaten to destroy the structure. Stability can hide a lot, even from the people living inside it. I'm not telling you any of this because I want to leave her or because I'm searching for a reason to stay. I'm telling you because I've finally run out of places to hide from myself. There's a quiet that comes with age, a quieter one that comes with truth, and an even deeper one that comes when you realize the truth won't change anything. I sit in this house with her, the woman who knows my habits better than she knows my thoughts. And I understand now that love isn't something you can perform into existence. You can't rebuild a feeling by reenacting the shape it used to have. You can't resuscitate what's already been gone for years. And so I move through our life with a kind of steady acceptance, not peace. Peace implies resolution. This is just the absence of resistance. A life lived honestly on the inside, silently on the outside. There are moments, small ones, where I wonder who I might have been if I'd faced this earlier, if I'd paid attention to the slow thinning of feeling instead of smoothing it over with routine. But those thoughts don't lead anywhere. They're just echoes that pass through the rooms when the house is especially quiet. At night, when she falls asleep beside me, I sometimes turn on my side and look at her the way I did that morning in the doorway. She looks peaceful, familiar, and I feel the same steady nothing, the same hollow awareness I've learned to carry. Not cruel, not kind, just true. I don't expect anyone to understand this. I'm not even sure I do, but I know it's real. I know it's mine. And maybe that's the only thing left to claim at this point in my life. The truth of it, spoken finally, even if it lands nowhere. I've made my choices. I've lived the life those choices built. And now I just sit with it quietly, without searching for redemption or reinvention. She breathes beside me, the house settles, and the truth sits in the room with us, unseen but solid. I don't love her anymore. I haven't for a long time. And saying it won't change a single thing except that it's no longer buried inside me.